These are the good, bad, and ugly highlights from a 4.5 hour, 335-kilometer full self-driving supervised test as an airport robotaxi. It includes driving in the dark and daylight, snow, rain, fog, and clear weather. Watch me be amazed and annoyed by full self-driving's behavior requiring 2 safety disengagements and watch it repeatedly abort due to weather conditions. My name is Dave, and I am another nerdy Canuck. I was going to drive some friends to the airport and decided to treat this as a robotaxi test for my 2020 Tesla Model Y. I figured this would be a good test on rural roads and in the city. Most of this drive was done with the bad weather detected warning on the screen. We are just going to rapid fire these highlights, so buckle up and hang on. Let's start with the things that were impressive. The Tesla definitely saw this pedestrian before I did. He was really hard to see in the dark and was wearing dark clothing, so I was really impressed when it picked him up as quickly as it did. This stop sign has given my car a lot of trouble in the past. This did a great turn at this stop sign. When it crept forward after stopping, it actually moved a little bit to the right to get a better view. And even though there was still a bit of hesitation, once it had crept forward enough, it made the turn completely on its own without any interventions for the first time. I was really pleased with this improvement. When we arrived at our destination, the car just pulled over to park. Yes, it did end up a little bit on the sidewalk, but I'll give it a little bit of a pass on that because there wasn't a whole lot of room for parking and it needed to get off the road. The takeoff from this position, though, definitely shows up in the bad section coming up. I find that the new version, 12.3.3, is doing a much better job at roundabouts. It used to enter our roundabouts in the rural part of our county at a very high rate of speed, but it certainly slows down, is much more cautious, and took this roundabout as well as any human. I thought I'd throw in a clip here of it approaching a yellow flashing light on some snowy roads. I know some people have commented that it seems to not handle a flashing yellow light really well, but it did this one completely flawlessly. With these snow-covered roads, I was really pleased with how well it did this corner. So it signaled into the ramp lane, navigates beautifully around the ramp, it accelerates, signals, merges back in with traffic, does a really fantastic job on this. I'll speed this clip up just a little bit so you can see it in double time. Here's a couple of examples of the car realizing that someone wanted to merge and slowing down to allow them to merge. This is very reassuring that it is able to anticipate the intended actions of other drivers. Especially this big truck with a signal on, it really had to slow down quite a bit to allow the truck to merge. Definitely a +1 for politeness on this drive. Of course, full self-driving always seems to have handled stop-and-go traffic really well, so there's no different in this new version. It does a great job. It actually behaves a little bit differently than I do normally during stop-and-go traffic, but what it does works really well and is very smooth. Thought I should mention lane changes. It does them on its own. It's very smooth. It simply signals. I like how it identifies the lane it's going to go into, and once it's entered the lane, it turns off its signal. It did a bunch of these during the drive, but I just wanted to show you one. In this clip, the Tesla noticed the car in the adjacent lane started drifting into my lane. I'm not sure if it thought it was changing lanes or it was just avoiding a collision, but either way, it just slowed down until the car had returned to its lane and then continued past. Unfortunately, I had the wrong destination for the airport, so I had to take over for routing at the last minute and couldn't show that part on this video. Highway merging is done really well. It accelerates nicely, signals, matches speed, and then pulls nice and smoothly into the adjacent lane. This is just one example of many that we did. After a quick morning breakfast stop, it did a great job of driving through the city to return to the highway, including driving around this parked truck. Shortly after that, at a green light, a truck took the liberty of extending his advanced green long after our light had already changed. Even though I had the right of way, the full self-driving yielded to the truck and then proceeded. It doesn't show it well in the video, but that whole process was handled so smoothly you would hardly notice anything was amiss. Approaching a stoplight in the fog, the car made the same lane change I would have to avoid a slow truck. Nicely done. After supercharging on the way home, I enabled Full Self Driving Supervised while in the parking lot. It did a great job of navigating the long drive out of the parking lot. This is just so impressive, especially with the snow obscuring some of the lines. This is sped up 3 times just to make it go a little quicker so you can follow us out of the parking lot. Once the weather cleared up, the rest of the drive home went great, including a lovely roundabout where it yielded nicely to a couple of vehicles. Again, this was just so smooth and human-like, it was really, really impressive. Of course, this drive was not perfect. Here are some of the worst parts. I continue to be disappointed with Tesla Full Self-Driving and its ability to not know what to do when the lane ends. Every once in a while it will do it right, but not today. This happens on the highway as well. It just drives until the lane starts to narrow and then cuts in without signaling. If there was a car in the adjacent lane, I would not like to see how that ended. I've discovered a new behavior and not a good one. When leaving town, the car clearly reads the higher speed sign and updates the maximum speed. But for some reason, it just doesn't seem interested in accelerating to the speed it's trying to maintain. This happens quite regularly for me and is extremely frustrating. This is not a safety concern, but it's very annoying. Leaving every small town I drive through requires me to press the accelerator to force it to get up to speed, and then once it's there, it maintains it just fine. I just don't know why it takes so long for it to get there on its own. Similarly, when coming into town, it takes way too long to slow down to the speed limit. It reads the speed sign, clearly reduces its maximum set speed, but then just takes way too long to slow down. This was a problem prior to the NHTSA recall on version 11, but it seems to have returned. It is my most frequent disengagement just to get the car to slow to the speed it says it's trying to maintain. After picking up our friends, when Full Self-Driving was engaged, it didn't pull back onto the road from where it had parked, so it just drove along the sidewalk. I had to take over to get it to go back onto the road. I'd say this was probably the most critical safety disengagement. With the snowy roads, the car became a bit confused when the double line split. It wasn't sure if a new lane was being created and started straddling the line. Once it realized what was going on, it corrected itself with no intervention required. As is well known, the auto wipers are terrible, so I did a lot of manual interventions for the duration of this drive. This happened throughout the trip, but was worth a mention. Now, to be fair, I'm not sure if Full Self-Driving Supervised could see the line without cleaning, but it was certainly needed for me. In this last clip of our bad section, the car didn't really notice the brake lights on the van up ahead. It probably would have stopped on its own, but it was going faster than I was comfortable with, especially with the slippery roads, so I braked myself. I would consider this a safety critical intervention. This last section is titled Ugly. All of these clips are from Full Self-Driving quitting on its own. The bad weather hindered its ability to see, and it would just give up. I'll let you judge, but is this the type of weather that it should be able to drive in? There were a number of different messages that showed when it did abort. Some identified the problem as being the front camera blocked, but sometimes it would just say aborted due to system error. I'm not even sure what that means. If you know what that means, please comment down below. Regardless of the reason, in order for Full Self-Driving to operate as a robotaxi, it has to be able to operate in normal April weather conditions, which is what I consider these to be. I am just hoping that they are being conservative right now and have the human take over anytime they are unsure. This is definitely an important problem to disposition before rolling out the software to drive on its own. I have to say that I was pretty impressed by this drive. This was an extended drive in a wide variety of lighting, weather, and road conditions. Even though there were a few things that weren't good and will need to be fixed, the vast majority of the 4.5 hours of driving was done very well. Most of the interventions or issues should be cleared up as training continues, and I am really looking forward to trying out the next version. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel to help support me. This is really appreciated. Here are a couple of videos that YouTube thinks you might like. Check them out. Thanks.